Welcome to today's Plastek Academy webinar presented by DirectDefense. I'm Henk Terwilliger, Global Director of Information Technology for the Plastek Group. In today's presentation, we will focus on how companies can prepare themselves for cybersecurity threats and challenges faced in today's ever-changing landscape. Topics covered will include best practices in cyber defense, how to identify potential weaknesses and close those gaps, and how to educate employees throughout the organization. Over the past year and a half, we at the Plastek Group have worked closely with DirectDefense to identify areas of weakness and to improve our cybersecurity defense capabilities. Together, we have deployed state-of-the-art tools in areas of system patching, password complexity, backup encryption, threat detection, and threat response. We have worked to empower both our information technology team as well as the general employee population in an effort to help combat the daily threats faced. As we thank our friends and cybersecurity experts from DirectDefense, we now welcome today's guest speaker, Chris Walka.
Good morning, everyone. This morning we will be talking about avoiding vendor-transmitted diseases, the importance of vetting your third-party vendors. Now, this topic is one that I've been speaking about for some time, and VTD is a phrase that I coined a couple of years ago in speaking to a group. And the point is, how well do you know the companies that you partner with? How well do you know your vendor partners? How well do you know maybe logistics integrators, firms that are in other ways involved in your business processes? We're going to talk a little bit about that today and make sure that you know your partners well enough that you can avoid VTDs. So what would be at stake if your entire operation crashed? When we're talking about systems integrations and we're talking about vendor partners, there are a lot of companies that don't manage their entire business process themselves. There are situations where organizations rely on third parties to produce parts for them, to produce entire products, maybe to handle the packaging and logistics and shipping of products to clients and customers, maybe assembly, manufacturing, components, and things of that nature. Understanding how you can secure the necessary integrations that exist when that's part of your business process is going to be a large part of what we focus on. I'm going to start here with a brief video clip, and I'll describe it when it's finished. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a US government experiment from 2007 at Idaho National Labs, and this is a power generator. This was one of the first published experiments where remote attackers, basically hackers that were not present at the device and facility, were able to cause it to self-destruct. You saw that first little bump there. Given the size of that device, that obviously was not something happening that they wanted to happen. You can see debris coming out of the device. You'll see additional components come out, and then they'll show you kind of the self-destruction of it. There's some steam, and then you're going to get some black smoke. All right, obviously somebody's not having a good day there. And this was an experiment, but it was intended to show the capability, particularly as it related to automated systems. And that could be a generator, it could be a refrigeration system, it could be a plastics molding facility, it could be automated assembly of some kind. It could be other sorts of building controls. It could be elevator controls, surveillance systems, badge readers. Having the ability to remotely access those systems and cause them to malfunction is what a lot of threat actors are after. And so whether it's a foothold to be able to steal information or whether it's just to disrupt business operations, those are things that really you want to protect. And that starts with understanding what are your critical functions. If you have any compliance requirements, understanding what they are and how they fit into what you are trying to accomplish in your day-to-day operations. The structure of your continuity of operations. So if you've got a particular capability, whether it's a piece of machinery or a function that's outsourced to a third party, do you have a way to function if that goes awry? If you have a bad day, things fall apart, do you have a way to continue your business operations? I'll give you a perfect example. I'm in Orlando, Florida. There's a hurricane outside right now. The wind's blowing. It was a lot worse last night, but right now it's probably blowing 50, 60 miles an hour. I set up everything today so that if my power goes out, we will still keep rolling. Everything's on battery, UPS, generators running. I'm good to go if something happens here. I've even got a battery powered light, just in case. Understanding your continuity of operations and how it applies to your business process is a really important part of this. So your vendors can be your best friends in that scenario. They could provide you additional capabilities, or they could be your worst enemy if they're not prepared properly and you aren't prepared to protect yourself. So understanding what that looks like and knowing what you need to do and have the capability to do is part of the process. And the one thing to note here is that a lot of these systems are not entirely on-premise anymore. Even industrial building controls, even critical manufacturing processes, a lot of times there are components of them that sit in a remote facility or even in the cloud. We see this sometimes as information that's pulled out of a manufacturing process and fed to business analytics. It might be inventory management, it might be order fulfillment, customer information systems for order processing and things like that. Understanding where those touch points are and what you can do to protect yourself is a big portion of how you need to be prepared to deal with these things. This was actually in this slide deck before the storm showed up here, so it's not something I just added. But understanding really where the center of the storm is from your perspective is really how you're going to be able to best prepare yourself. So first and foremost, understanding where you have touch points with third parties, where the data flows on, where the information is moving. A lot of organizations that we work with, particularly in the commercial and industrial side, the manufacturing space in particular, don't necessarily have a really good solid understanding of where their information flows. Some do, a lot don't. Knowing where your information is moving, how it's being utilized, how it's being shared with different systems, either that you have control over, or maybe you only have partial control over. Maybe it's being shared with, like I said, logistics vendors or other areas. You need to know where that data is moving. That's the first piece. The second piece is understanding what is normal in your environment. So from a monitoring perspective, establishing your baseline. The baseline is, we know that this system talks to that system on a routine basis. We know we've got some batch process that runs at midnight every night that maybe uploads data into inventory or part of a financial system. We know that once a night there's a backup process, once a week there's some sort of reconciliation process, and then understanding how that plays into any third parties that need access. So in a lot of cases in the commercial and industrial world, there are third parties, maybe they're third party integrators, maybe they're third party vendor partners that need remote access into your environment. One of the common mistakes is in letting them entirely dictate what that remote access is, dictate how they get access to it. We even see cases where it's part of the contractual requirements. If you want to use our system, if you want to use our software, we have to have access using this mechanism. I would say that you turn that on its head and you take control of that and you maintain control of that. You be the one that dictates what that process is, how it's managed, the authentication for it particularly, and probably most importantly, in the trusted verification process, monitor it and determine whether or not it needs to stay on all the time. Lots of remote access can be shut off when it's not being used. It's a little bit more burden on the IT staff, but from a threat standpoint, it really is one of the better ways to go about things. And then lastly, understanding what your system integrations look like. A lot of times when there's a system integration, and by that I mean sharing information, so that could be sharing inventory, sharing order process, sharing shipping, tracking information, any of that stuff. A lot of times that means that there is some sort of a shared credential, whether it's an API key, whether it's just a password. Knowing that that exists and having control over it is very, very important. Credential leakage happens when you lose track of where things are being used, and that can be very problematic, particularly if you end up in a breach type scenario. So most architectures in the industrial space were not designed to withstand cyber threats. And this is because a lot of these systems use components that you can't apply typical IT security controls. You can't put antivirus on, for instance, a PLC, a logic controller. You can't necessarily put a SIM agent in an environment like that and have it entirely understand what's going on. A lot of them don't understand, don't speak basically the industrial control protocols. So when we talk about things like this and understanding what your baseline is, you need to make sure that the tools you're using have the capability to understand what's going on in your systems. And then the organizations that you're partnering with, if it's a cybersecurity organization like ours, that they have the expertise to understand that these are not just standard IT systems. Now they might be standard IT systems, and it might be that it's just everyday run-of-the-mill. You can put antivirus on it. You can use a SIM platform to monitor what's happening. That's great. If you can do that, by all means, go for it. But in a lot of situations in the commercial and industrial space, that's not the case. So making sure that you get the right tools and the right capabilities and have that visibility is really one of the key areas that you need to be able to protect yourself. What are the industries facing? I'm going to start with the bottom stat here. Supply chain was responsible for 62% of system intrusion incidents this year. Now that's coming, we take statistics like this from a couple of the well-known, published, vetted reports that are put out by a couple of the larger data analytics firms each year. But north of 60%, we'll call it, those companies contracted a vendor-transmitted disease. They didn't know their vendors well enough, or they didn't protect themselves. So take the prophylactic effort to protect yourself from the supply chain. We talk about things like the SolarWinds attack. What happened there? Well, when they were breached in such a way that the attack looked like it was part of a software update. So antivirus isn't necessarily going to catch something like that. Your endpoint protection isn't going to protect from what appears to be a signed patch. That's where testing comes in. Understanding that you need to have the time, the capability, the wherewithal to take a system patch like that and test it and make sure that it's not going to cause any problems in your environment. That a little bit of lag time in the testing gives enough time that if something does get released and security researchers discover it, that you can roll it back quickly. So this is a common problem in the industrial control space because a lot of manufacturing systems don't have spares. You can't just go stand up a spare system on the side. You can't just go have extras. So it is necessary at some point to have some capability for system testing. And as you look at working with partners and as you look at integrating systems and doing upgrades, you should be considering, do we have the capability? Do we have an extra? Do we have a spare? And that also goes to your continuity of operations. If something were to happen and a patch caused a problem, or you did manage to get a virus or ransomware or something like that, do you have the capability to restore a backup to a secondary system that's similar to the first one so that you can get things back online faster? These supply chain attacks, a lot of them are backdoor incidents. And what I mean by that is we'll take, for example, the target data breach. I ask this question all the time, and obviously this is not a live interaction as much as we'll get to the Q&A session at the end. But in live environments, I normally ask, hold the room, Can anybody tell me the name of the vendor that caused the target data breach? Nobody ever can. I've never had anybody be able to tell me. The target data breach was caused by an HVAC vendor. They basically had a contract for a few stores locally to serve and to provide service for the chiller systems that maintain the heat and air conditioning in stores. That vendor had remote access to be able to get in and monitor those systems, and it was a smaller, what we'll call a mom and pop heat and air conditioning maintenance vendor. They don't have the kind of resources that a larger corporation does to protect themselves. They don't necessarily even realize that it's necessary to have endpoint protection, the right types of antivirus, being careful with their credentials. They were breached. The threat actors then utilized them to get into the HVAC systems within Target. And then they waited and they took time and they went low and slow to remain undetected. And somewhere 4 to 6 months later, they finally managed to find their way into the payment system that are used for the cash registers in the stores, got access to the credit card data, and here we have this enormous data breach that everybody hears about. Had Target been monitoring that remote access and had some controls in place to prevent certain types of things happening in that environment, the breach would not have happened. So that's really where you have to understand what exactly are you doing when you're letting somebody connect in, and how are you going to protect yourself. So talking a little bit about this, talked about the Target data breach, I talked about SolarWinds a little bit. Home Depot was also breached in a similar fashion, third-party vendor. These are not small companies. They don't have small IT shops, they don't have small cybersecurity budgets. Even the largest firms are susceptible to this if they aren't doing the right things in the right way. And it's not the first thing they think about. They don't necessarily think about this little HVAC vendor for a local store. You know, when you have a company that size with that many people, they're worried about their data centers, they're worried about their cloud presence, they're worried about phishing attacks, they're worried about, you know, ransomware. They're not worried about stuff like that, or they weren't. It really has become a bigger problem because, as you saw, 62% of attacks last year. This really is one of the top threat vectors. It really is one of the major problems that's out there. And organizations that aren't aware of it and aren't prepared for it, they're going to end up in difficult situations. So these are financially reportable situations. They are responsible for millions of dollars in credit monitoring and threat monitoring. In the new privacy laws that are coming out, so let's say GDPR or the California Privacy Act, CCPA, which is modeled after GDPR. GDPR is the EU, for anyone not familiar. And it's people living and working in the EU, not necessarily EU citizens. So EU citizens come to the US, they fall out of scope for GDPR. US citizens go to the EU to work in a facility there, they fall in scope. But this isn't small fines. We're talking about first incident, 10 million euros, second incident, 20 million euros, or 2% of revenue. So think about that. For very large organizations like these, 2% of revenue could be hundreds of millions. That could crush a business. So these are things that are very important that need to be taken seriously. Understanding what's in your ecosystem. So you control your environment. And if you need to interact with someone and give them access or share information with them or allow them to put something in or give them remote access, you have to determine whether what they want to put in is going to be a beneficial bacteria or a bad virus. That ecosystem is yours to protect. Take the wherewithal to understand up front, particularly when you're dealing with new relationships, right? That new relationship energy, everybody gets excited, everybody wants to have this interaction. Don't walk away with a VTD. End up in a situation where you have some control, put the contractual language in place. Talk to them about the controls they have, trust but verify, ask for proof, ask for audit reports. If it's a big enough relationship and a big enough situation, ask to see pen test reports, ask to perform your own pen test. Those are the types of things that you should be doing. But also make sure that your contractual language gives you the ability to have some control. We have seen contractual language that forces a company into a situation where a third party dictates how they get remote access. Don't be in that scenario without talking it over with somebody who knows, whether it's your internal staff, whether you have a frank conversation with the partner, or whether you're talking to somebody like us. Take the time to have those conversations up front so you don't end up in these scenarios. We see this very commonly in the commercial and industrial space where you're reliant on a third party, maybe that's maintaining equipment for you. And we have actually been in the middle of tests and found remote access devices that were installed by third parties that the company didn't know were there. So we had one vendor that was supporting a network for an organization, and this organization was a drinking water supplier. And we saw some funny things on the network, and so we asked the third party to give us access to look in the router because they maintained the router. And as we got in, theoretically, the third party only had access when it was turned on, when it was enabled by IT. And so IT enabled it, they got in, they gave us access, then IT turned it off and we were in locally, and I'm watching them continue to make changes in real time. So we knew they had access when they weren't supposed to, and it turns out they had installed their own cellular modem at a remote site and not said anything to anyone. So not that that's a regular occurrence, but let me tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. We've seen some things. So who's at risk? And why are you at risk? So you as the system owner, as the ecosystem owner, understanding where you're sharing your information, we talked about that a little bit before, where it's going, what organizations are doing with it, how they're storing it, how they're transporting it, and then where there are third-party partners and even fourth-party. So making sure that the organization that you are partnered with doesn't have 2 or 3 other partners in the background that are flowing information, using your information, or even part of the remote access process into your environment. Now, you should be able to monitor for these types of things if you set the system up correctly. But once again, if you don't want a VTD, you have to know where your partner's been, right? Or at least have a frank conversation about it. So what does this mean for you? Oversight over vendor and product choice. Sometimes there's a temptation to go with the cheapest partner. Make sure that the cheapest partner isn't the cheapest because they're not spending money to protect themselves. Make sure that they have some governance in place. Make sure that you have the right governance in place to understand what's coming and going in the environment. A lot of times this means making sure that you're aware of new relationships. You don't want to accuse anybody here, but sometimes sales or the business side of an organization will make a decision and proceed with a partnership because it's best for the business financially. But if they don't involve the technical side in the conversations up front, sometimes you don't make the best choices. So make sure if you're in that business leadership, business line leadership, sales, marketing, business development role, that you're talking to your technical staff to make sure that you're not making decisions that are putting the organization at risk. Because at the end of the day, there are people who won't shop at Target anymore. There are people that won't shop at Home Depot anymore. There are people that have sued organizations. There are smaller companies that have gone under because of data breaches. Be aware of what's going on in those types of scenarios. Make your choices, make your partnership choices for best practice and not just cheapest. And then have frank conversations with the partners you do choose about what they're doing to protect themselves. And in that case, what they're doing to protect you. That third-party risk evaluation should be part of every relationship that you have in business. It needs to be in the back of your mind. It's sad that that's the way things are, but so be it. Good for me, bad for you. We do breach work, and let me tell you, COVID has been breach season. Lots and lots of organizations were forced to make changes on the fly for remote access for employees, unplanned changes that were made very quickly instead of a normal change control process that they might implement. And it means that things were missed. It means that little misconfigurations happened. And because of that, there's enhanced exposure to risk. So work with partners that you know are making the effort to protect themselves, you protect yourselves, and then go about the process of involving a third party who has a good reputation. I like to think we do. And there's lots of others out there that do as well, and are vetting what you've done to make sure that you didn't miss something. You're not necessarily, even the largest organizations that have enormous budgets aren't necessarily going to afford or hire the best of the best when it comes to adversarial cyber activities. So penetration testing, web application testing, mobile application testing. If you've got your own OT, SCADA, IoT manufacturing environment, we have a specialty practice in that. That's my background. It's part of the reason I'm here talking to you about this. Going in and looking at all these relationships are something that either you need to be doing yourself or you need to get some help from somebody who knows how. How to protect yourself. So if you decide that you're going to go about this yourself, look at what is in your environment and understand the capabilities. So if you have smart devices, if you have sensors, if you have smart meters, remote terminal units, programmable logic controllers, things that make automated manufacturing run, then you need the capability to evaluate those for threats without taking them offline. These systems are very sensitive. You can't just go and do a normal pen test against them. You can't run a normal vulnerability scan against them. You have to have a very light touch capability to evaluate them for security posture. Even if you are not in that space and you're going to move into that space, or for instance, you want to make a change to, let's say you're just a normal business that doesn't do any manufacturing and all you have is sales and logistics, and you outsource, let's say Plastek is your supplier, they're making products for you. But you move into a new building and you have badge readers and surveillance cameras and things like that. Surveillance cameras are one of the #1 ways that we manage to breach companies when we're asked to do so. A lot of times they don't get updated. A lot of times they're just kind of left, they get installed, the system works, nobody worries about it, they don't get patched. The patches exist, they're out there, but it's one of the easiest way to breach a company in a lot of cases because they're sitting on your internal network. So understand what's there, what's in your ecosystem. When I talk about that, those are some of the things that I'm talking about. Additionally, anywhere that you can strengthen your authentication, that slows down the bad guys. So multi-factor authentication, having the capability, having the necessity to be able to turn off credentials, change default passwords, role-based access control where it's possible. It's not always possible. But then monitoring that environment to understand that baseline. The reason the baseline is so important is when you understand your baseline for your environment, when you understand what normal traffic flow looks like, then it's easier to spot anomalies. It's easier to spot the things that don't belong. When you're talking about protective considerations, first and foremost, design the capabilities in up front if you can. A lot of organizations, when it's time for a technology refresh, they just say, okay, we need the new version of the old, and we're going to go forward with that. Sometimes little design changes will allow you to have much better monitoring capability, particularly when we're talking about segmentation of traffic. If information doesn't need to flow somewhere, don't let it flow there. Take control over that process. Define and identify your risk. Do you really need to worry about unpatched vulnerabilities in your manufacturing environment? I mean, you do, but is it your top priority? Is it your #1 risk? Is it the easiest thing to attack? It may not be, but evaluate that and understand it for yourself. Have discussions around responsibilities. So a lot of times when you have multiple systems, you might have part of a team that manages an application for finance and another one that manages an application for HR and another one that's managing your environment for logistics and packaging and maybe manufacturing. Make sure everyone's on the same page. Particularly in the OT manufacturing environments, it happens a lot that organizations say, that's managed by that team and we don't mess with it. Well, wait a minute, because if that team needs help from a vendor, they may arrange for remote access for that vendor without talking to you. So you want to make sure you're involved in all those conversations and everyone's on the same page. You're not trying to take their job away from them. You want to make sure that they understand that they could be the risk that hurts the company. And really important here, you're not trying to point fingers. It has to be a team. So that team effort, that sense of camaraderie, and sometimes that means you get the people out of the manufacturing facility or out of the logistics space, and you sit down and you have lunch with them, do like a lunch and learn, and do a little bit of training, talk about risk topics and things like this. You know, you can get pretty far with somebody by buying them a piece of pizza or a beer. Take that time, have that conversation, and make sure that senior leadership understands as well, because a lot of times these are areas where there is additional cost involved. The security for some of this stuff costs money. The business may run on tight margins. Everyone needs to understand that it costs a lot more money when you've been breached. When you've got to bring somebody like us in to do an incident handling engagement, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then if you have to pay out for ransomware, or you have to pay out for something like breach notifications to clients, it gets into the millions pretty fast. At the end of the day, don't just rely on any one control. Don't just rely on the monitoring. Don't just rely on your contractual language. Everything you do in this space, as you're interacting with third parties, trust but verify. So that concludes my presentation. As I mentioned, we work with Plastek Group and have helped them quite a bit in some of these areas. I want to thank you for your time. You can reach out to us if you have any questions, if you'd like to engage us. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter as the Cyber Pirate. So like and subscribe. Thank you, everyone.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you, Chris, and hello to our audience that we have on here with us today. My name is Nicole Freeman, and I am the corporate marketing coordinator for the Plastek Group, as well as the moderator here for the Plastek Academy. As we introduce the Q&A session, just want to make a couple of notes here as we see some questions coming in. As Chris mentioned, you know, we are both open to answering your questions and continuing conversations that are specific to you, your role, your job title, your responsibilities, and your organization. So please take note of our contact information that you see on the screen there before you leave today. And we want to introduce the Q&A session and kick things off in a timely manner with some live questions for Chris. So we are going to dive right in now. This is a little bit different of a topic that we've had with the Plastek Academy. So we expect to see a lot of great questions, and we thank Chris for being here with DirectDefense. To kick things off, I think that last slide that Chris started was a great introduction to some questions, as we have a very broad audience from different job roles and responsibilities, and the fact that this is a pretty technical and unique area of topics. So we want to just recap and summarize for somebody who is not in the informational technology realm. As you called out, a lot of importance in the fact that we want to make people aware of how important these situations are. Can you summarize what is the best way to make sure that the vendors that X company partners with don't cause a problem or that greater risk factor that you spoke of?
Good question, Nicole. Thank you for that. So really, the goal is understanding your risks. And if you don't understand your risks and you are working with people that don't understand the risks, then find someone who does. Engage a partner, talk to other people in your organization, talk to partner organizations. If you have relationships, maybe you work someplace else and you've got some friends there. We do this work with the Plastek Group. So we engage with them to help them understand their risks and to help manage them and to help reduce that overall risk footprint. In doing so, they then become less of a risk to their customers, their clients. And so part of it is talking to your third parties or even within your own organization to say, what are we doing? Or what are they doing? Or have we talked to them about it? Do we know what they're doing? Are they having assessments performed? Do they have a risk management program in this space? Are we monitoring their traffic? What information are we sharing? The open dialogue is really the most important part of it. And you don't have to be the expert. Cybersecurity, probably as I track it, has about 35 or 40 job tracks, domains, if you want to call it, that you could go into, and some of them are technical and some of them are not. No one is going to be an expert in all of it. That's not expected. But what is expected is that you ask questions when you don't know the right answer.
Great. One of the phrases that you used in your previous slides here was third-party risk evaluation, and I had made a note here, and this may extend the answer to your question, and we actually had our audience ask the question, so I'll use their phrasing. Is there a list of canned questions you can recommend to ask third-party vendors? So as you're talking about, you don't have to be the expert, but once an organization identifies who would be responsible for the decision to do business with a scaled company, as you mentioned, it could be a big company, it could be a large company, a small company. It doesn't really matter. A hack is a hack and a risk is a risk in this digital world. And so maybe even pending, a second question I have is on this is, at what point in time in the proposals and the conversations that organizations are having with these third parties, do they even bring this up? Okay, we've identified the capabilities and services, we've identified our need, our capacities, the commitment. All these bullet points can be made of, yes, they can supply the item and the product and the service that I need. But when does that question get asked of, what are the risks? So is there a questionnaire that can be provided or a short canned list of questions recommended for this risk evaluation and conversation?
Absolutely. So I've spent half my career on the consulting side and half my career working for large organizations. A lot of the time spent in critical infrastructure, energy, water, wastewater, oil, gas, and mining, where making mistakes like this can cost people's lives. And so the organizations that are in that type of space have been doing this for a long time. So take the energy sector, for example. There's an organization, it's actually a private corporation that's been deputized by the US government to maintain control over the power grid in the US. It's called NERC, the North American Energy Reliability Corporation. And that organization has a set of standards the energy sector has to comply with, and part of that includes third-party vendor risk. I'm actually on one of the standards committees that's involved with that space. So there are questionnaires that can be used from other areas. There are some that are just out there. There are others that can be customized for your organization. I happen to know one large energy company that has roughly a 35-page questionnaire. And so engineering firms and other large firms that want to contract with them have to, and this is just cyber risk, 35 pages of cyber risk questions. A lot of organizations choose not to work with them because they don't want to answer all those questions or it's too onerous. The way around something like that is to consider getting a third-party certification. So our organization is ISO 27001 certified. That means we've had a third-party auditor come through and certify that our operations as it relates to helping our clients meet an internationally accredited standard for cyber risk, cybersecurity. Other organizations might choose to undergo something like a NIST cybersecurity framework assessment, and we do this too. If we assess your organization for NIST CSF compliance, we'll give you a letter stating that as of this date, we went through and audited your environment and found you to be in compliance. And if you weren't in compliance, you put a plan to get there in place called a plan of actions and milestones. So that's one piece of it. I can, after this, follow up with some basic questions, but the real questions, probably the top 5 are are they even aware this is a topic? Do they have a program in place to manage their risk? Do they have a periodic assessment by a third party? Do they manage and monitor their own systems? And do they have the capability to abide by whatever security requirements you have? And those are defined by what that interaction looks like. If all they're doing is sharing information out of a customer information system, and maybe you're both using the same cloud-based solution and that is managed by a third party that handles the security for it, then great. But if it's something homegrown or it's more detailed than that, where there's an actual interaction between the organizations, you need to understand what that looks like and how that information is going to flow and what security controls you need. So yeah, we can follow up with some basic questions, but those are probably the top.
Great. Yeah, I know I've enjoyed this webinar. We've got some comments. Great job, Chris. Well done. This has been very educative. And again, I know that we have a broad spectrum of job titles and responsibilities. So thank you for taking the time to educate this topic with us. Just to close things out, we have a couple minutes. I want to let everybody know, in addition to maybe a follow-up that we'll do, you can keep following us on LinkedIn, have our contact information, and then if you're interested in maybe that questionnaire, you know, I'm not promising anything as far as, you know, the questionnaire that Chris mentioned and some of these topics, but we'll somehow get you the information of those standard 10 questions. But there's a survey after the webinar. You can let us know if you're interested in that or follow up as well. But DirectDefense and Chris's team has provided also some great handouts. There's about 4 or 5 handouts here with services, a couple case studies, and their advocation information for being informed, being strategic, and being secure. So if you check out your dashboard before you leave here today, there is a handout toolbar. If you drop that open, there's those PDFs there. As we're wrapping things up here, you can just open them up. You don't have to read them. You don't have to save them. They'll be open and you can save them after the webinar so that you can have those to access. But again, as you heard our information technology manager, Hank Terwilliger, at the opening, here at Plastek, we've done a lot of also introductory level education as well with our employees, and teaching them what phishing is and password protection and that encryption and the importance of what they can do if they're not in an IT role. Chris, can you wrap up with any intermediate, beginner, you know, introductory to what somebody who's not in the IT department can contribute to preventing these risks that you talked about today?
The biggest thing for just the users in an environment, or maybe the managers in an environment that are not technical, is awareness. Being aware that when you come across a scenario where you know there needs to be an interaction with an outside firm, sharing information, might be integration of a new platform, and you've got a partner who's doing the integration. Whenever you come across something like that, make sure that your IT and information security organizations are involved. A lot of times they don't hear about it until after a product is chosen and it's time to perform the integration, and by that time contractually it may be too late to do anything. So as soon as there are even planning stages around something like that, take the time to reach out to them and have somebody from that organization sit in and be part of the conversation. A lot of times they're just a fly on the wall, but they may interject 1 or 2 questions, or they may, you asked before about when to engage. A lot of times these questions are pre-proposal, pre-qualifications. So if you can't meet the cybersecurity requirements, let's say you put out an RFP for this particular capability, those cybersecurity requirements should be part of that RFP. They should be part of the pre-qualification. And if you can't meet those or don't have the capability to, then that's an organization that you might want to exclude from bidding or exclude from potential partnership. That's frankly the best way to protect yourself. And that's not always an easy discussion to have. You also, any current relationships, bring it up. Bring it up now. Don't wait to contract renegotiate. Say, you know what, we're evaluating our cyber risk. We need to have a conversation about this and just be frank and open. We want to protect our organization. We'd like to know what you're doing to protect yours, since we share information, since we allow you access to our systems. Let's have a conversation about it.
Very good. All right, well, we are going to continue to work around the clock here. You know, we are a global company. We've got many from different time zones. You guys are a great resource to us these past several months as we're implementing these new strategies. So it's a learning process every day, checking in on things every day around the clock. So again, thank you, Chris. We hope you stay safe down there in Florida during your time there. We made it through the webinar today, everyone. So again, thank you for your attendance. And we're just going to close out here with this last slide to let you know these final items here. Those of you who asked questions today, if we didn't get to them, again, we will have access to them. We'll share them with Chris and his team, and we'll attempt to reach out and get those answered for you in some way, shape, or form. And again, the survey, some of you are already asking for the link, so we appreciate your participation there. Again, when you exit the survey, exit the webinar, exit this GoToWebinar platform, you'll see a pop-up window, and you'll be able to take that brief survey there and let us know your opinions. We enjoy being here with you at the Plastek Academy. You can also watch this on demand. It is being recorded, so later in a few hours it will be uploaded to plastekgroup.com/plastek-academy, as well as the GoToWebinar platform. You can also view any of our previous Plastek Academy webinars if you find interest in any of those topics within the manufacturing and plastics industry to help your personal development and career education in your own roles and organizations. So without further ado, we will end today with the knowledge that we have. Again, thank you to our audience. Thank you to Chris and DirectDefense. Until next month, have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.